Please, Marvel, please stop giving Aunt May boyfriends. Hey, it's Jug. Aunt May might be one of the most iconic characters in Spider-Man's supporting cast. She is literally the person who raised him and fed him wheat cakes. How could she not be iconic? But Marvel has this weird obsession with giving Aunt May new boyfriends. And if there's one thing you don't want to be in the Marvel Universe, it's Aunt May's boyfriend. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Jug, why would I not want to be a boyfriend of Aunt May? I mean, she's a baddie and her nephew is Spider-Man. Well, because if you don't want a guaranteed death sentence, don't date Aunt May. I mean, her boyfriends and her husbands, for that matter, have the worst luck. Even worse than Spider-Man's luck. I mean, if the writers have it out for anybody, they have it out for Aunt May's boyfriends. But don't just take my word for it. Let's talk about it. Who exactly has Aunt May dated? Well, probably the most well-known and obvious answer is Uncle Ben. Everyone pretty much knows the story of Uncle Ben. You know, Ben Parker, a regular, honest, hardworking man, fell in love with Aunt May and they got married. But after the death of Peter Parker's parents, May and Ben take in their nephew Peter Parker and raise him as their own. You could say that Ben took on the responsibility of raising Peter Parker as his own. Well, Peter eventually gains spider powers, which he uses irresponsibly, which inevitably leads to the death of Uncle Ben, thus marking the first tragic death in the long line of deaths connected to Aunt May. Now, some of you might know this next boyfriend of Aunt May's from his battles with Spider-Man. Yes, I'm talking about Doc Ock. In some of the earliest Spider-Man comics, the writers were really experimenting, so they thought it would be interesting to pair up Aunt May with Doc Ock. Peter finds out about this and he's shocked to not only learn that they're dating, but they're also about to get married. It's eventually discovered that Doc Ock is doing this for a nefarious purpose. You see, Aunt May had this relative who basically owned like all the nuclear power plants on this coast, and she was about to inherit some of those nuclear power plants. It's absolutely insane that Aunt May is related to all these like famous, popular, powerful people. I think that there might be an Aunt May conspiracy afoot. But of course, Doc Ock was planning to kind of steal this nuclear facility by marrying Aunt May. The wedding did occur, but it was interrupted by both Spider-Man and some of Hammerhead's goons, so Aunt May and Doc Ock never got married. However, although Doc Ock was marrying Aunt May for the nuclear facility, from getting to know her, Doc Ock actually developed feelings for Aunt May. Sadly, their relationship just fizzled out, and Doc Ock and Aunt May never ended up together. This was the end of their relationship, and probably the least tragic end for any of Aunt May's boyfriends. Unless you count the fact that Doc Ock gets like major brain damage from getting his head beat in by Aunt May's nephew so many times, to the point where he actually dies, but instead of dying, he switches his mind with Peter Parker, Aunt May's nephew, takes over his body, and it is Peter Parker's Spider-Man for a while, and then they end up switching back, and then he takes over the body of a clone, and then he dies, and then he's recloned and come back. Whatever, we're not talking about that, we're gonna move on. Our next relationship is Nathan Lebensky, who Aunt May met when she was recovering from a severe coronary bypass. Nathan was another patient in the nursing home, but the two quickly fell in love and actually got engaged to get married. Peter wasn't the biggest fan of Nathan, especially since Nathan had a gambling problem. But since gambling is one of the best sports in the world, and most people actually cash out right before they're about to win at gambling, Nathan decided to cash out his life insurance policy and gamble it all, betting on this famous person's death. But when Nathan takes Aunt May and Peter to witness his victory at the casino, Vulture attacks and ends up taking Aunt May as a hostage for money. Nathan fights the Vulture, grabbing his leg as the Vulture flies into the sky. But since Nathan is old and has a pretty weak heart, he eventually loses his grip. As he's falling to his death, Spider-Man's actually able to save Nathan from the fall. But because of the fall, Nathan's heart gives out. As he's lying on the ground, Nathan mutters his last words, saying he regrets not having won gambling. Truly an inspiration for all gamblers out there. But this is yet another tragic death of Aunt May's boyfriend. So tragic, in fact, that when Aunt May talks about Nathan's death, she says that when Ben died, part of her heart died. When Peter's parents died, another part of her heart died. And when Nathan died, the rest of her heart died. But don't worry, Aunt May continues to put herself out there. She even finds herself in relationships with people like Willie Lumpkin. Now, for those of you who don't know who Willie Lumpkin is, he's basically like the comic version of Stan Lee. You know how Stan Lee did all the cameos in the Marvel movies? Well, Willie Lumpkin is actually like the cameo guy in the comics. In the 60s, Willie Lumpkin was like this postman delivery guy, but he seemed to get around the Marvel universe and meet everybody. So of course, Willie Lumpkin had a quick fling with Aunt May. However, eventually there came a time where Aunt May was presumed dead, just like always. So when Willie Lumpkin heard of this, he quickly grieved Aunt May's death and decided to move on with another woman, Doreen Greenwald. Sorry, Aunt May, you shouldn't have almost died. You just lost yourself another man. Also, fuck you, Doreen. Now there's one relationship between Aunt May and a guy that you might not be expecting. That would be the relationship between Aunt May and Uncle Ben's brother, Richard. Yes, the same Richard that is Peter Parker's dad. In a comic called Trouble that released in 2010, May, Ben, Mary, and Richard are all teenagers at this summer camp-like thing. And since they are teenagers, you know, antics ensue and they all start dating. Mary starts dating Richard, and May starts dating Ben. However, Ben is not the best in bed, and Richard is a horn dog. So May ends up getting it on with Richard, and Richard ends up actually knocking May up. Mary takes the baby to Richard, claiming that it's their baby from the summer, which actually implies something crazy, a total retcon to all of Spider-Man, that May Parker is actually the real mom of Peter Parker. Richard's still the father, Mary just isn't the mother, May is, but Mary raised Peter like a child and lied to Richard that it was hers. I don't even know how to process this information. This comic is one of the most hated comics of all time, to the point where it's been kind of ignored so much that we don't even know if it's still in continuity. But it's worth a mention because it's another failed May relationship. Now, I'm sure you all know Jarvis from the Iron Man movies. You know that AI voice thing that talks to Iron Man in his suit?
Wake up, Daddy's home.
Welcome home, sir. Congratulations on the opening ceremony.
Well, what if I told you that Aunt May actually dated Jarvis? I know that sounds really weird, and Aunt May isn't one of those people who's trying to like date ChatGPT now that she has a voice. But you see, in the comics, Jarvis isn't some sort of artificial intelligence like in the movies. Jarvis is actually like the Avengers or Iron Man's Alfred, you know, like a butler who's there to help out. The relationship between May and Jarvis started after May discovered that Spider-Man was her nephew. Then her house was blown up, and then Mary Jane, May, and Peter all moved into Avengers Tower. As May and Jarvis started to interact, the duo realized that they actually had a lot in common. They were both caretakers to superheroes, they were both amazing cooks, and they were both just kind people. Jarvis was especially impressed that May was able to stand up to herself, even to superheroes, and May was attracted to Jarvis's kindness above everything else. Their relationship became so strong that when an alternate universe version of Ben Parker came to try and steal Aunt May away, Jarvis was ready to fight for her. Sadly, as Civil War broke out and Peter revealed his identity, and then he switched teams and was on the opposite side of Iron Man, and all these different people were hunting him down and his family, Aunt May and Jarvis's relationship got lost between all of this because Peter and MJ actually changed history when they erased their marriage. So Aunt May and Jarvis kind of forgot that they ever dated each other, and all their interactions they had just don't exist anymore, which is really a shame because they seemed like a great couple. Outside of the comics, Aunt May also had a couple of relationships that I'll just mention here so you know about them. In the Ultimate Spider-Man TV show, Aunt May actually was dating an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D., Phil Coulson. Phil Coulson and Aunt May were going on dates and they were having lovely time, but they both decided mutually that their relationship was kind of a distraction to Spider-Man, so it was better if they didn't date. In the Marvel Cinematic Universe, May has a fling with Happy Hogan, which Peter also seems to struggle with a little. However, that isn't what ended the relationship. They have this on and off again relationship until Green Goblin actually ends up killing Aunt May. And finally, in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, there's actually a working theory that Aunt May might have dated Dr. Octopus. Now, if you remember, in this universe, Dr. Octopus was actually a woman named Liv. In the movie, she tells Peter Parker that her friends call her Liv, but her enemies call her Doc Ock.
My friends actually call me Liv. My enemies call me Doc Ock.
Later in the film, when Doc Ock actually crosses paths with Aunt May, May says, "Hi, Liv." Since May and Otto were a thing in the comics, people are speculating that this May and Otto might actually have been a thing as well. But that brings us to our final relationship of Aunt May, and probably the second biggest right behind Uncle Ben. And that is the relationship of Aunt May and J. Jonah Jameson Sr. May and Jay met when Peter's then girlfriend, Betty Brant, introduced May to Jay, thinking that they'd be a great match. In only 4 weeks, the two bonded over losing their spouses tragically and fell madly in love, since they both understood how precious their time was due to the fragile nature of life. Although they were old, their chemistry was still off the charts, as Peter actually discovered one night. And it isn't long before May and Jay finalized their union, making May Miss J. Jonah Jameson Sr. and finally giving her happily ever after. That is until Jay contracted a rare and hereditary illness while doing charity work around the globe and passed away soon after, widowing May once more. So there you have it, every relationship Aunt May has been in. What are your thoughts? At this point, would you consider Aunt May a player? Let me know in the comments below, and thanks for watching.